Gary. Thank you for the Alliance Community Trees for putting this event together. I'm Kevin Gillen. I'm a Vice President with Econsult Corporation. As you might imagine by the name, we're basically economic consultants. Believe it or not, our clients have actually included major home builders, Walmart, other major developers, and pretty much everyone that in this room would hate. We were asked to actually look at the economic value of open space. And the reason they asked us, being economists rather than environmentalists, is because they figured, well, if our results hold up and they're positive in sort of a true Nixon goes to China fashion, then it's not just the environmentalists who think that open space has an economic value. It's us cold-eyed economists who have shown that it has value as well. So we put together a report called Return on Environment, as opposed to, say, Return on Investment. This report was sponsored by the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, which is sort of like the governing body in the tri-state area of southeastern Pennsylvania, northern Delaware, and South Jersey, looking at planning issues and land use issues in the region. And the commission is basically composed of all the town supervisors and mayors of all the townships and cities and municipalities in the region. And they came to us and they said, we get approached all the time by major developers. It's actually public parks. Another 30% is privately owned or eased land. So this is private land in which the township or the county has bought the development rights. The land is privately owned, it can trade hands, but it can't be developed. And then lastly is preserved farmland. Again, the same thing. It's the land is actively used as farms, it's privately owned, but again, the township or the county has purchased the development rights. So 200,000 acres. So what's the value of all that open space? Remember, 1 acre per hour is being developed. So time was, it certainly is a very pressing issue. So if we go to the next slide, here we have, again, another map of the region where each municipality is color-coded by one of 4 uses. One, we've got the core city, that's that tan polygon in the very center, that's Philadelphia and Camden, New Jersey. Second, you see that sort of red-colored ring around the tan. Those are developed communities, those are older inner-ring suburbs. Then you've got sort of an olive ring around that. Those are growing suburbs, your ex-urban communities. And then at the very outer fringes, the tan color, that's the rural areas, that's actively used farmland. Overlaid on that, you'll see a bunch of little green polygons. Those are the 200,000 acres of currently preserved open space in the Delaware Valley. So some of them are very large, like there's Valley Forge Park, where Washington spent the winter. There's Fairmount Park in Philadelphia, one of the largest urban parks in the country. There's a number of other state parks scattered throughout the region, and of course, out in the rural areas is where you have your preserved farmland and preserved private land. So we got to put an explicit number on every single one of those parcels. You sum them all up, you get 200,000 acres. Next slide. So basically what we did is we looked at home sales in the region. We ran a very complicated regression where, if you know what a regression is, basically we decomposed house prices into, what an additional bedroom or bathroom and all that is worth. And then plus, depending on how close you are to open space and what type of open space it is, that entered as a variable in the regression. And what we found is that open space helps sustain and improve home and property values in several ways. On average, being within walking distance, about a quarter mile of open space, increases the value of your home by about $10,000 on average. Okay, so it's $10,000 to your tax base, to every home that's within a quarter mile of open space. If you sum that across the housing stock of the region, that adds about $16 billion to the region's housing stock. And one interesting, surprising result is that we found that the value of open space, the dollar value, is actually more valuable to city dwellers than suburbanites. In other words, the more built up your area is, the more valuable the open space. And at first that seemed counterintuitive to our audience because, well, if you like open space that much, why are you living in the city? But it's diminishing marginal utility, right? I mean, if you live in a developed area, having an acre of open space near you is much more valuable than if you live in a rural area, right? Because there's you're surrounded by so much open space, having another preserved park or preserved farmland doesn't do a whole lot for your home value. So, in other words, if you say you want to preserve 200,000 acres of open space, that open space is actually much more valuable being preserved in the urban areas than it actually is in the rural areas, because the rural areas have so much of it to begin with. And just to put the numbers on that, the value of open space that is being within walking distance of it increases home values in the city by 14%, but as you go out to the rural areas, the marginal contribution of being near open space is only 0.7%. So it really declines as you move out from the developed cities out to the rural areas through the suburbs. So the next slide, please. Moreover, we also found that the economic value of open space has actually grown over time. This shows the percent increase in house prices going back over the past 5 years. The red line represents the percent increase in city home values for being near open space. Blue line is in the suburbs. And as you can see, the red lines are growing quite dramatically over the course of the past 5 years. Being near a park in the city back in 2005 will increase your home values on average by 0.7%, but by 2008 that had grown to 10.2%. And of course we take this as supporting evidence that people have just sort of become more ecologically conscious over the course of the past 10 years with talk of climate change and things like that. So the value of open space is not only very real, but it's actually been growing over the time. The trajectory of that value has basically been upwards. Next one. Then lastly, just to give you some anecdotal evidence that open space does have an actual economic value, it's not just statistics and data saying this, we found that real estate agents are actually, when they put their listings out, are actually denoting whether or not a home is near open space or a park or not. So on the left, there's a home in Wayne, Pennsylvania that's on the main line, a very affluent area, and you see it says, this townhouse backs the Radnor Trail with a private entrance for your additional enjoyment. The one on the right is in Downingtown, PA. It's this great location. Sunnybrook Park is literally across the street and directly connects with Carton Park, and from there, the biking, walking, Struble Trail. So, if real estate agents are actually, who know their local market as well as anyone else, and who have precious column space in advertising their listings, are actually putting the attributes of proximity to open space in there, well, then it can't just be economists and environmentalists who think that open space has some value, right? So the next one, we'll move through very quickly the other categories, since a lot of this stuff you've heard before. We're just doing it for the Delaware Valley. Environmental services, as you know, open space cleans the air, purifies the water. You also have dry basements if you have flood mitigation. With water quality and supply services, the region saves $61 million annually. In flood mitigation services, by allowing, by not overdeveloping the area so that it creates excessive runoff every time it rains, we save $37 million annually. And then air pollution services, the carbon sequestration saves about $17 million annually. And the next one, recreation and health benefits. As we like to say, hike, run, bike, camp, save. So physical activity on protected open spaces saves the region about $1.3 billion annually. That works out to about nearly $400 per household. And this comes from healthcare cost savings, savings in workers' comp costs, greater worker productivity, less sick time being taken off from work. You sum all that stuff up because people just get more exercise by living in an area that offers access to open space and recreational activities therein. Adds another $1.3 billion to the region's bottom line. And then lastly, jobs and revenue. Places that attract spending also help sustain jobs. Open spaces attract visitors. They support local economies. This helps increase and sustains jobs. We identified that open space supports about 7,000 jobs in the public and private sector. So that's either direct jobs that people who work in the park, like our rangers here, even if they're from Los Angeles, our forestry service guys, as well as, of course, the spending effect. So those people take their wages, they spend in the region, that helps support another round of jobs, so forth and so on. About half a billion a year in total expenditures to preserve and maintain the open spaces. That's about $300 million in wages paid out each year, and that results in about $30.2 million in revenue collections back to the states and municipalities for the people that are employed in those jobs. So, in summary, if you protect our land, you support your tax base, that helps preserve your money. Open space keeps money in your pockets and the pockets of future generations. It does have a very real economic value, and this has to be countered against what the opportunity cost of any proposed development is. And we think that actually taking the economic value of open space into consideration when considering development options does make good economic policy. And lastly, this is obviously a very, very abridged version of this report. If you'd like to read it yourself, you can download Return on Environment from dvrpc.org or just greenspacealliance.org. That's basically our presentation, so we'll move on to the next one.
Kevin, this is awesome. We always look for numbers to tell our story.